Hi, I'm Joseph R. Lewis and I write adventures. And in today's video, I want to talk about loot. What stuff do your players get in your adventure? And where is it? And why is it there? So let's talk about loot. First off, I want to point out that I'm using the word loot and not the word treasure, because usually when we say treasure, we're talking about money and trinkets and shiny gold and gems and things like that. But I want to talk about all of the other stuff, in addition to treasure, that we give out to our players, that we put in our adventures. So the first question I want to address is, why is there loot in our games? Why do we put it in our adventures? And I came up with two basic reasons. The first is we provide loot to provide solutions or partial solutions to the players that they can use to overcome our obstacles. So we're giving them the tools they need to build their own solutions, to feel clever, to make progress, to deal with traps and monsters and all sorts of environmental hazards that we've put in our adventure. So we're giving them the tools to succeed. That's reason number one for loot. Reason number two for loot is to reward the players for having overcome those obstacles. So that would be, giving them the big shiny thing that they've been trying to achieve at the end of the adventure, or giving them the milestone things they need along the way during the adventure. But again, to reward overcoming the obstacle. So, what kind of loot is in our adventures? What is loot? And I came up with three categories because threes are good. And the first is mundane items. And this should be everything that you're already thinking of. It's the shovels and the ropes and the candles and the common daggers. It's all the cooking supplies in the kitchen. It's all the blacksmithing supplies in the blacksmith shop. All of the things that are lying around. Now, we don't always list all of the things that are lying around, all these mundane items, but we all know that players are very likely to come into the room and they do the thing that's obvious, and then someone will say, "Hey, is there a rope in here that I can find?" And then the GM will roll a die and say, "Yeah, there's a rope. You can find a rope here. That makes sense." Um, so we don't need to list out all of the mundane items all the time, but it is helpful, especially because we're not all medieval blacksmiths. Not all GMs know everything about every kind of profession or location. So if there are types of objects that should be in a space because they're professionally make sense, or if they're types of objects that should be in a sense because it makes sense for your narrative, then it by all means put a little bullet in that just says in this location you can also find hammers, tongs, pliers, loose wire, or you can find bandages and clean water and empty bottles, or you can find remnants of human skeletons, or whatever it is that's lying around that the players could begin to MacGyver, to cobble together to make a solution for the next thing that's coming along. Give the GM a little list, help them out, make their job a little easier. The second type of object are consumable items, limited use items. And these are things like potions, maps, keys, things that are very useful um, in helping helping the players to overcome the obstacles and make forward progress. But we don't want to make them too powerful or too useful. So the map only indicates how to get to one thing, or the potion can only be drunk one time. So it's useful. They want it, but they need to consume it. They need to make a cost, risk analysis. Do I want to use it now? Do I want to save it? But again, it can only be used once, so it's not too powerful, but it is helpful to them in making forward progress. And the third type of object are rare items. These are your magic objects and weapons, the very special, important things. Stuff that the players really like because it makes them more powerful, it helps them to level up, it helps them to overcome a creature or an obstacle that can only be solved with this one magic effect or this one special weapon. Um, these are, again, rare, so they happen less often, but they're more exciting and people remember them more when they find them and they get them. So those are my three types of loot: mundane tools, consumable supplies, and rare items. And I also want to touch on, do you make up your own, or do you use the ones that came with your gaming system? So I'm sure there's a player's handbook or some kind of warden's guide or dungeon master's guide that lists tons of items that have been pre-designed by the designers of your game, that you can, if you credit appropriately, that you can just put into your adventure. That's great. Lots of players like to look through those resources and they say, "Oh, look at all these cool tools and objects and weapons. I hope I get to find them one day in an adventure." So you could make the choice to put those items in your adventure so they can find them and have them. Alternatively, And what I do is I create all of my unique items entirely from scratch, all bespoke, custom made new items for every adventure that I write. And in that way, I don't need to remember how they're supposed to work from the book. Um, I don't need to make sure I'm crediting the right people the right way or using the right words. So that makes it a little easier for me as the writer. But also, it's more fun for me because I like to create unique and bespoke items that are unique to the adventure, that make space here, that makes sense here in this space. So that could mean it's a named item. So if this is the Temple of Nebelzebub, then you can find Nebelzebub's robe. And then when the character walks off with it, they have this unique item. It reminds them of the adventure. It's bespoke to whatever that situation was or the NPC it came from, which I think it makes it more unique, more memorable, and more special. But that's my choice. And again, you can do it either way. Use the book items or use your own custom items. All right, our next question is where is the loot? Where do the players find it? So for our mundane tools, they should be everywhere. Almost every location should have some loose objects lying around, either in the description or just bulleted out for the GM that says, this stuff is here. And the players should be able to move through the spaces, move through your locations, and find lots of stuff lying around that can be helpful to them to, again, overcome obstacles and make forward progress in the game. The second type of object we had were consumable supplies. I think those should be in many locations, but obviously not all. Maybe more like half or a third of your location should have those kinds of things where they can find a potion of healing, or some bandages, or torches, or that map, or that singular key. Again, they should be somewhat logical, but those should be spread out because, again, the players aren't going to find them all. So you may think, oh no, I've put 10 healing potions in this adventure. That's too much. If they find all 10, they have too much healing. They probably won't find all 10. That's the reality. Somewhere between the players not checking all the locations, not searching, or even the GM overlooking the fact that it was listed in your bullet points, and oops, they should have found a potion. Things tend to fall through the cracks in play. So I have found that providing extra stuff doesn't tend to be a problem. And if the GM at the table starts to sense that it's a problem because their players have found 7 of the 10 potions already, maybe they'll make the choice to not mention the next 3. But I think we're helping the GM by giving them extra tools, and it's much easier for them to pare back too much stuff than it is for them to realize they don't have enough stuff and they need to start adding stuff during play. We don't want to give them more cognitive load, more work, more burdens to handle while they're trying to run their game and have fun. And our third type of object were those rare items, the magic objects and weapons. And where do we want to locate them? They should be in those very special places that reward overcoming the obstacles. So maybe the boss character has them on their person, or they're in the chest right behind the boss guy, or right beyond the very large obstacle that was hard to overcome. They should be, in that sense, easier to find, but harder to get. Whereas before, with things like the mundane tools, maybe those were a little bit harder to find. It was in the rubble, but they were easy to get. You just had to pick it up. So by contrast, now our rare items maybe are easy to see. Oh yeah, the big giant monster guy has a big giant monster sword. That's very cool, but it's hard to get. You have to overcome the big giant monster guy. So again, put your mundane tools and items everywhere. Put your consumable supplies in lots of places. And put your rare items right behind very large important obstacles. Because again, we want to reward overcoming those obstacles. The last thing I want to talk about regarding loot is how do we present it in the written form of our adventure? There are a couple of ways to do it. I think they all have their uses and places, and I use multiple ways of presenting loot. One is when you have very rare and specific items, like those big treasures and things that the boss has, they should be on the page in the location where they specifically are. So if you have to get to location 35 and overcome the orc boss in order to get the flaming sword, then the flaming sword should be on the page with the orc boss in location 30, whatever I said. And that should all be right together for the GM so they don't lose track of it. They know exactly where it is. And when the player asks about it, they can say, yep, the orc boss has, and it looks like this, and it does this, and it has this effect. And that should be very easy and compact and in one place. By contrast, a lot of the other stuff, the supplies and the random objects, they can be absolutely listed out in the location text, either in the description or in sub-bullets, as these are extra items. Sometimes I also just indicate in this location there is small loot, or in this location is big loot, and go to see page X. And then on page X, I'll just have loot tables. And you could have one big table that's all of the loot in your adventure. They can roll on and get random loot. That's great. You can also divide it up into different types. So you could have 10 potions and 10 books and 10 tools and 10 whatever. So the GM can make an informed decision and say, well, my players have found a lot of potions already, so maybe I should let them find some tools or weapons or clothing or whatever else would be helpful to them. So they can shape play a little bit more because they know it's happening. Um, one of the frustrating things is you could do a lot of work making a fantastic D100 table of all the types of loot that could be found, and they could roll on it on every room they go through. But if they keep rolling 5 and they keep finding a sleep potion, they're going to say this adventure was pretty boring. There were just sleep potions in every room, and you've got 99 other things that you just never found, which can be frustrating. And that then puts the work, the onus on the GM to try to overcome that problem that they're encountering. So they start looking through your lists and trying to pick out things that are interesting to them that they want to reward the players with. So maybe dividing up the loot into smaller tables so that the GM can easily say, it makes sense to find this sort of thing in this location, or to say, my players are wrestling with this problem a lot. Let me try to give them a little help by rolling on this table instead of this table. So those are helpful ways to do it. Another thing you can do is maybe at the end of your adventure, have some kind of little index that is all of the magic items or special or bespoke items, not the common tools and loot, but the special objects. Have them listed out in alphabetical order in a little appendix or index so that inevitably when a player says, hey, I found the shoes of Kadu 3 sessions ago. What do they do again? I wrote down shoes of Kadu and I don't know what they do. And now the GM is like, I don't remember where the shoes of Kadu were, and they're looking for it. If they have a little index or appendix at the back of your adventure they can flip to, and they can find alphabetically the shoes of Kadu, then they can tell the player, oh yeah, this is what your magic shoes do. So that's, again, something that's helpful to the GM that I've started doing or sometimes do because it's something that I've encountered in play. When I get those sort of questions, I want those tools easy to find, ready to hand, so that I can help my players and we can keep moving quickly and not get hung up on trying to answer questions or play with mechanics. And make it easy for people to run. Remember, you're not writing for everyone. You're only writing for the GM who is reading. So you want to help them make your adventure as fun and successful at the table as possible. And I think that's about all the advice I have for loot. So good luck out there.